Okay, so welcome everybody. I thought I'd just begin by reminding us of where we were last time, because people come and go all the time. But what we had tried, this was our grand experiment that we tried to do, which is to have two groups so that we would have topic-centered groups. And so one topic-centered group that people were very much interested in was assessment. And the other topic-centered group was very much interested in coaching. And so we had those two groups. And last session, we met first with the assessment group because there were a small number of us, and we said, let's all just be together. And so we met with the assessment group, and the assessment group kind of chatted. And one of the things that we realized as far as we went, I mean, we had some really great discussions, but we realized that many of us were not really working with students directly. I think Denise was the only one who really had a class of students. And we thought maybe the best thing to do is for us to actually begin to think about assessment from a classroom perspective, which is what we were trying to do, and to maybe just wait and see what kinds of rubrics, what kinds of things we could collect, put resources together, but that probably the discussion around assessment needed more classroom teachers who were actually on the ground doing assessment with kids. With that said, we moved over, and the whole group moved over to coaching. And at that point, we said, you know, we're all very much interested in coaching. And people said, some of my responsibilities are around coaching. I am really an instructional leader who requires that I do some of this work. I really want to know, what are we talking about as an institute when we use the term coaching? And that set us on fire. Like, let's really think about that. And we promised that this session, we would try to both model what we meant by it and also perhaps begin to grab some understanding of what do we really mean by it. And so with that in mind, we all talked. So here's who we all are, just so you know. Juanita, Pat, Michelle, Allison, Art, and I were all in a conversation about, you know, what is it that we are really trying to do when we're thinking about coaching? And then we had a Google Doc, because life is not complete without at least one Google Doc. And we had a Google Doc, and we talked back and forth. And out of that, we thought that this was our first real attempt, that we don't mean for these Monday sessions to be training sessions. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay out some of our initial thinking. And then if people are continuing to be interested in what more we can learn from this, we'll begin to shape something that might be a set of training sessions, better kind of conversations that go deeper with this. But at least for tonight, we're going to try to frame the way we began to think about what we mean by coaching. And one of the first things that we discovered as we talked was maybe coaching is the wrong term. So I'm going to turn it over to Art, who's going to talk with us a little bit about his perspective, but not his, kind of the group's perspective that we've all been talking about and how he kind of sees this. So Art, your turn.
Thank you. I'm going to build on what Bena just said, and that is an invitation to reconsider the term. In other words, coaching itself causes you to think about when you have been coached or when you have coached others. And for example, with Michelle and Juanita and Pat, I know that they have been through cognitive coaching. And so you can't help but think about all of the skills and the purposes and the framework of cognitive coaching as you think of coaching. But that doesn't mean that everybody thinks that way. And we know, for example, that athletes think about coaching from a playground perspective. My son-in-law thinks about coaching because as a high school teacher, he served as a pole vaulting coach. So that's what he thinks about. Also, if you're coming from school where you've had, quote, supervision, then that might mean evaluation. And we don't mean that at all. It might mean that you are trying to get somebody to change what they're doing. And so we're working on them by evaluating, by advising, and that's not what we mean either. And so I'm suggesting that we not use the term coaching, that we drop that from our vocabulary and deplete it from our mind. Now that means that we have to think of something else. And so instead of thinking that we are a coach, we might think that we are, for example, a habits mentor or a personal, well, for example, if you were to go to Nepal, your guide would be called a Sherpa. Well, maybe we need a habits Sherpa. In other words, there are a lot of other ways of expressing what it means to guide, to counsel, to lead. And so we need to think about what might be better called this role that we want to play with another person. Furthermore, I think the habits of mind are powerful enough that we don't need to think about other models of coaching, but rather think about what the habits of mind can do for us in this process. So as we work with other people, do we persist, for example? Do we ask questions? Do we clarify when we don't understand? Do we know how to draw out past information, past successes from people? In other words, the skills of a coach, or should I say a Sherpa, and by the way, in Hawaii, we call it kumu, K-U-M-U, that's called a teacher. So as we think about the role of a teacher, we can call out previous experiences because that is something that is congruent with the habits of mind. So while I'm saying all this, what I'm trying to get at is, I think we need to think anew about what coaching, which I'm not going to use that word again, what we are about for a unique model of the habits of mind. And the reason I'm saying that is because I believe that the habits of mind in and of themselves are powerful enough to become the substance of interaction between two people to improve performance.
So let's hold on to that, Art, because maybe that is a way to think about this without naming it. So say that just one more time. It's an interaction between two people. Go ahead.
It's an interaction between two people. And I would say that it has a framework, it has purposes and skills related to it. But the intent is to solve problems, to improve performance, to build a stronger person, to help them become even more effective in whatever role that they are playing. And so again, I'm trying to not use that word, but that's what I mean. You all have been coached. You all have been working with people who have made an influence on you and who have used their skills to help you grow. And so think about the ways that they have done that. And what we want to do is to use the habits of mind to help other people grow and prosper and become even more proficient in what they're doing. Now, what we call it, I don't know. I'm suggesting that we not call it coaching, but we call it something else. So it's a whole new framework that we want to consider. And I think the skills that a person in this role plays can be drawn directly from the habits of mind. We certainly listen to each other with understanding and empathy. We ask questions. We are able to cause people to draw forward previous experiences, previous successes. We want them to take risks. In other words, all of the behaviors of the habits of mind are the behaviors that a person would use to interact with another person and to improve their performance.
So let's invite people to just kind of think alongside that. What are some of your thoughts as you listen to what Art is saying?
When I hear the words come alongside and interact and the idea of more than one person, the word collaborator.
So that's a strong word. I'm taking notes on it so that we have it. So one of the things is that we're thinking that one of the attributes of a relationship like this would be that it would be somebody who's willing to be very collaborative. What are some of the other things that we associate with a role like this?
I was thinking of two words. One was facilitator some way and mentor. In my business, I am called a coach. My company is called Learning Arts Coaching. So it's interesting to me to unpack that term a little bit with all of you tonight and think about what that actually means. So, thank you, Art and Bena, for that. Facilitator, mentor, those are the two words that come to mind.
Michelle, as you think about it, you're saying that in a way it might be distinguishable from a coach. In what ways might it be distinguishable? Is a coach in your mind also a facilitator, also a mentor? And if not, what makes it different?
Right. Well, it's interesting because one of the form of coaching that I follow is called coactive coaching. And so it is very much, it takes on the attributes that you're talking about, Art, in the sense that it's collaborative. It's not, it's not a coaching form in which a person moves the action forward. It's a coactive environment in which it's highly collaborative, and the coachee is moving the action forward as much as the coach is moving the action forward. So I have such a different view of the term than what you were positing, which it was interesting to me to see it from a different angle. But that's, in coactive coaching, it is very much an exchange, and because habits of mind form the basis for what I do, the habits are the vehicle through which coactive coaching happens. So that what I've been thinking about as you've been speaking.
I think that's great. I think we ought to get down what are those behaviors that this person that you're talking about uses. For example, you use the term collaboration, and I would certainly agree with that. All we have to do is change a few words and call that thinking interdependently, because that's one of the terms. So
that's right.
So a habits of mind mentor, and I'm being very cautious about using the words. A habits of mind mentor is one who would then use that vocabulary in the interactions about the habits of mind. That'd be one of the attributes.
I'm also really intrigued, especially Michelle, as you started to just so thoughtfully describe the connection in your work, the distinction between authority and expertise, and starting to see how that sort of resonates with the group. Because as I was starting to listen in and imagine what you were talking about, the notion of facilitator and mentor, they have a little bit of a distinction, but I'm starting to imagine that a mentor potentially sort of has a level of expertise, but doesn't necessarily have an authority or a supervisory position. So I'm just curious
this is one of the interesting things about coactive coaching too, which I think mentorship also kind of assumes, is there's when you go into the relationship with the coachee or the mentee, it's your bedrock assumption is that that person is whole, that they are resourceful, and that they have the creativity to move forward in whatever change they're trying to make happen. So it's not a position of this person is in need of help and I'm here to help them. It's this person has all of the attributes of a person who can make things happen, and I am kind of along for the ride, supporting them with the habits of mind so that they can change the habits in their lives and move it forward. So it's very different kind of viewpoint. And I would imagine as a mentor, you have to make those assumptions too, that that person is whole, that they are creative and resourceful.
I think there's something kind of tricky about all of that, though. So I just want to sort of raise it, because as much as we believe, and I think what I'm gathering from this part of the conversation is that we have a set of assumptions about the other as we do a set of assumptions about ourselves.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. But then I do think that the reason we are collaborating and the reason we are engaged is because, I guess I'm inclined to say, because we're a good thought partner. And if we're a good thought partner, then we do have a certain capacity, not just to be collaborative, but to also keep elevating the level of thinking between us so that we're able to raise it to another level. So I don't think we're just along for the ride. I guess that would be my thought.
I think you're right, Bena. I think that's true and really fair. It's a fair observation that it is more than being along for the ride, for sure.
For sure.
We're helping to advance movement and change and growth. That is true.
What I'm hearing is, are we basically talking about mentoring or leading adults, or are we actually talking about mentoring and leading people who may not have these type of, they need help in this area? And most of the people that I run into, and even myself from growing from this, it was the fact that introducing them and letting them know that they have them and developing them is the main gist of that. And then my mentoring and my modeling and all of that comes in. But until someone buys into that, I don't know if you were just talking about facilitators or coaches or whatever. When I hear that, introducing that kind of brings a bright light into people's mind. I mean, I've even used that with my friends and different things like that. And just to be mindful of just these 16 habits and began to, figure things out in your life dealing with that. So I don't know, I guess I don't know if you're coming from what you're saying, a coaching or whatever, but I think that sometimes you don't even have buy-in because people don't even know that they need to buy in until they see something or they hear it and they taste it and you model it to them, and then they have to buy in. Most of the people, I had to get to buy in, my teachers, everything. And even with kids, I mean, it's a constant before I began to, so I guess I'm facilitating in a way, but I'm just introducing at first, and then I'm getting them to buy it. I don't know. I don't know.
Denise, I think I appreciate what you offered. And it's that idea of, I think one of the things that you raise is that our conversations that we have as thought partners, as a Sherpa, whatever the term is that we use, they're different depending upon the need and the context and the intention of that exchange. What I think both Art and Bena that you spoke about, as you launch this, is that the habits of mind are the connector. They're the glue, they're the anchor, depending upon the context, the intention, and the kind of conversation. So you might be having a conversation with someone who has no knowledge of the habits of mind, and you might pique their interest by using some of the language, or because of the experience that they have engaging with you that might spark a curiosity in them. Then you might engage with someone else who really wants you to come alongside and co-create something. That to me is a different kind of conversation. And so the word that I keep coming back to internally is our intention in the conversation is different depending on the need and the context. And part of, I think, our challenge and opportunity is to grow, and I'll say me, to grow in my capacity to really lift and keep the habits of mind front and center, both internally for myself and verbally and even non-verbally, as in exchanges with others. I guess the last comment that I wanted to offer is that mentor, facilitator, collaborator, one of the things I thought is, gosh, we could spend a whole hour talking about what do those words mean to each of us.
Mhm.
And just like with the habits of mind, that time for really unpacking those and experiencing those is so important. I think that just really stood out for me, that all of those words have so many different meanings for each of us.
Yeah, I would think that a next step for us somewhere along the line would be to describe what are the attributes of this person who is in a facilitative role with the habits of mind, and what is unique about this particular form of interaction. Also, what do we draw upon from previous experiences? For example, those of you who have been through cognitive coaching, we're not going to give up all that we learned about establishing rapport, about listening with understanding and empathy. We call it something different now, but it's the same thing, about how we ask questions that are not throwaway questions, but really that have an intention behind them, that they are beautiful questions, as Jim Knight says. So we want to use all of those skills that we have learned, but just place them in a new context. And the new context would be for the purpose of drawing on the habits of mind to help solve problems, to establish rapport with other people. Here's an example. I just the other day got an email from a fellow in Hawaii who used to teach at one of our certified schools. He moved to another island. He moved to Maui, and he joined a school, and he has tried to spread the habits of mind, but he's alone. He's a loner. And so he's not been able to convince the teacher or the administrator or the other teachers that they ought to look at and consider the habits of mind. So what advice would I give him? What did I do? Well, I went to Catherine Kane because she knows him, and asked him to, and she's going to work with him to ask him for some suggestions that she might give him in spreading it to others. So all I'm saying is that I don't necessarily have to coach him, because we have a large number of people who can do that for us. Catherine is both familiar with the situation in Hawaii as well as knowing this fellow. So it was pretty obvious. So the only advice that I could give him was hang in there, persist, keep doing what you're doing, because I drew upon the habits of mind for that one. But he already knows that. I don't need to tell him that. So anyhow, what I'm saying is the problems that people bring to us are not just instructional, are not just personal, are not just interactive. We are able to hear them and work with them and discover what they really want to accomplish and why, so that we have to work with them in such a way that we build rapport with them. And the intent of it is to help them solve problems, or to help them solve problems for themselves, I should say. So that's just one example of how somebody came to me with a problem. And what I've tried to do is to get them to think independently with another person who is more knowledgeable than I am.
So one thing we thought would be helpful in this whole conversation would be to actually see what it looks like when it actually is happening, and then step away and say, okay, what did we just observe, and how does that inform our thinking further? So I'm going to ask us to put a pause on our conversation right now and see Michelle modeling with Andrea, who so generously has been willing to have this experience with us. And I'm going to record it. But what I'm going to ask all of us to do is the agenda. So I'll just show you what, I know we don't usually ever have PowerPoints, but I thought that it might be helpful for us in this instance to just have a little bit of an agenda. So if you give me a moment. what I did was I actually created a little agenda for tonight. And I thought that this might kind of guide us so that we're able to do what we were hoping to do. So what we have for tonight's meeting is what we just did, which is the role of habits of mind in communicating with others. And I use the term thought partner just as a holding place to not say coach. And then we thought that Michelle would model in a conversation so that she could kind of say, if I'm guided by the lens of the habits of mind, what does my conversation look like? Then we would have a breakout where we would be observing, like, what did we see just happen? What are some of the things that we observed? Then we come back and debrief. And as a group, we sort of come together to say, so what have we learned from this opportunity? So what I'm going to ask is that when we do actually have the Michelle and Andrea talking, it's going to be spontaneous, extemporaneous. I don't think that there's any prep on this other than Andrea said yes, and Michelle said thank you. Am I right, Michelle? And so what we're going to do is we're going to ask you, as you listen, they're going to model this and we're going to report it so you can go back and see it again. And which habits of mind did you notice Michelle was using most prominently? Now we know, probably you're going to see a lot. So just kind of jump in and say, which are the ones that sort of really jumped out at you? And then where might there be additional opportunities for using habits of mind in a situation like this? Were there a few that you thought, wow, it would have been maybe helpful to pay attention to this habit of mind? And we're going to give you a chance to go into a breakout room. We have a way for you to record your thinking in small groups. We'll break you into groups no larger than 3 or 4 people. You'll have your conversations. Then we'll come back and we will then have a group conversation again. So what we're going to ask you to do for right now, because we want to keep our focus on Michelle and Andrea, if everybody could just mute yourselves. And also, I find it's often more helpful in this kind of modeling situation on Zoom if you also close out your video. And that way, we're all just focused on Michelle and Andrea. And then, Michelle, take it away.
So Bena, I'm going to add, I just want to check on the time. We're looking at about, I think we had talked about 5 minutes. Is that still? So Andrea, thank you so much. Bena was right that I reached out and, in thinking about tonight's conversation and just a few things that I know that are going on for you. This, Council Rock, you guys are a certified school and it's really coming up to that time for your school renewal. Mm-hmm. And then you're engaging in the individual practitioner certification pathway. And you've been engaged with habits of mind for a number of years. Mm-hmm. So in thinking about tonight's conversation and just all of those different elements at play, I thought it might be a nice opportunity to just check in and see where you're at, see where you'd like to be as you continue to move forward in this journey with habits of mind. Taking a responsible risk, reaching out to you. Just appreciating that you're willing to share some thinking with us. Yeah. So I guess I'd like to begin maybe with, given sort of that frame for our conversation and knowing that you're a continuous learner and you're open to new learning. What might be a few words or phrases that capture sort of where you are in your learning journey now, individually and or maybe as a member of a school?
Wow. Well, individually, it's funny. I thought I was so, I don't know, maybe more advanced than actually I am, because when I started the badge with Craig, the first badge with Craig in the fall, I was like, oh, this is going to be just, old hat. And I just was really pleasantly surprised at how much deeper I was able to go. It was unexpected, and it was a pleasant surprise. So yeah, I feel like I've learned so much, and yet there's so much more. So I guess I see myself still like on this journey, and maybe even not as far on the journey as I thought, which actually, I don't know. I like to be on the journey because it is fun. So as a school, we've made a lot of progress. I think this year is very exciting because we are trying to incorporate habits of mind into our makerspace. So we're talking about developing a maker mindset in adults and children, and habits of mind are a huge part of that. So that's super exciting because it's become, it used to be like, what are these habits? And let's figure out, what they even are. But now we're really applying it to instructional practice. So I think the challenge is everyone's in a different place in the journey. We have a lot of newer teachers. We have people who have been in this since the beginning. So how do you keep moving forward while also bringing people up to speed? I think that's our biggest challenge, while also just incorporating lots of fun and interesting things with the habits of mind.
So a lot, both for you personally and as a member of the school community. That idea personally for you, you're really open to the responsible risks, and you're open to the joy that comes in the act of learning. And that's really stretching you in terms of remaining open to some new creating, some new imagining, and some new innovating. And it sounds like that's the same experience really that's happening at the school, that there are some common experiences and beliefs as a community, and you're all really stretching yourselves to grow and to go deeper, to not really rest on the journey you've been on, but really be open to and curious about what's ahead. And part of that curiosity, it sounds like, is taking you all deeper into the curriculum piece. And you talked about makerspace and lots of connections between makerspace and habits of mind. In that area and that exploration as a school, what's intriguing or most interesting about that for you?
Well, I think the maker mindset, we've kind of defined it as it's that I can do it belief in yourself. And so in the maker space, we're tinkering, taking things apart, putting things together, and all of that helps you not just build things, but build yourself as a person, build your thinking dispositions, which habits of mind are the major ones that we focus on. We talk a lot about growth mindset as well in the maker space. So I think the exciting part is just, oh gosh, how it's just it all seems to just come together. Like all this work we've done for years seems to have come together in this idea of maker mindset. I love it when things connect. So when you see the fruit of what you've been doing and how it does all connect, is pretty exciting.
Sure. So you all have really been persisting in this journey, and it's when you said you like how everything fits, it's like you've got all of the pieces of the puzzle and they're all connecting. And there's an openness also to continue to sort of expand that puzzle, it sounds like, by learning and growing more, both individually and collectively. So I know our time is tight tonight, and there's lots ahead in this journey. And from the Institute's perspective, we're excited to come alongside you all. Certainly in this next phase of renewal, sounds like it will be a season of refinement and creativity. Maybe just a last wondering, and then certainly we can connect and continue forward. What are really maybe some of your best hopes? If you were to fast forward, say 6 months from now, what are some best hopes for you and for your colleagues in moving forward?
I think our hopes actually go beyond our school. The hope is that this habits of mind are going to expand K-12, and we are seeing some progress with that. So we have sent our children, so we're K1 and 2 building.
Mhm.
So we have sent them off for close to 10 years to the next building without a plan in place of how to sustain habits of mind. And I think we're finally getting to a point where there's going to be a plan. I'm meeting with the elementary school, so their 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade building tomorrow. They already have some things in place, but they invited me to come and share some more ideas. So that is my biggest hope. I would love to see a real strong foundation in all 4 of our schools in the district.
How exciting. You've got really an audience and an opportunity to lift up certainly what is passionate for you and your community, but to really pour into the students and the community, the larger school community, by really exploring and exposing them to habits of mind. Boy, 10 years, that's a powerful, significant journey.
Yes.
Oh, so exciting. I know we need to stop right now, and I want to leave you with maybe a couple of next steps that we might connect on. One, I'd love to circle back and find out how that meeting goes tomorrow, and how, from an institute's perspective, how we might come alongside and partner with you in not just your school's renewal, so grades 1 and 2, but really being a partner and thinking interdependently about what the other schools might need and how we can support you in paving the way. And then I know I'll see you in the Zooms for the individual practitioner. So I'm excited for your learning and just your persistence.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tonight, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to move you right into the breakout so that you have a chance to really think a lot about what just took place. And Michelle and Andrea, you'll be in a breakout also, so you can also reflect on what took place. And then we'll come back. We're going to give you 5 minutes for reflection. And Allison is going to lead the way with breakout room. Liz Locatelli, thank you, Liz, has put in the chat the worksheets that we created so that you would be able to record the conversation that you're having. So that would be the last piece, just to go to that place and to make sure that you're looking at those worksheets so that you can actually, wait, I'll show you what it looks like, just so that you can actually see what it is. So here are the worksheets, and we're going to ask you to just record. We put the habits of mind here as a reminder, just in case. And the habit of mind, the describing the language, the notes, and then what might be some other opportunities. Okay, I'm done.
All right, we're creating the breakout sessions now,
Bena,
so about 5 minutes. Any
Bena,
other
do you want
questions?
to make
before
it
we go?
so we can all share, so we can share our screens in case people want to do that in the breakout room?
So tell me what I have to do, Liz.
Just go to screen share at the bottom, and there should be a little arrow, and you should be able to say all participants can share screens.
I think the other piece, the other half of that was that in our conversation, we talked about how much it was for Andrea, both a collective interest in thinking interdependently, but also a personal interest in your own growth and how you were showing your awesome and your pleasure with just growing and remaining open to continuous learning. So it was a beautiful combination of that, and how much you're applying past knowledge as you move forward.
In our group, we talked about 2 pieces. One is the use of vocabulary in her paraphrases and her questioning, but then there were the unspoken habits of mind, listening with understanding and empathy, questioning and problem posing, thinking about your thinking, all of those other pieces that were not necessarily articulated in actual words, but that were happening in the pattern of language she was using.
So one of the things I want to say is I noticed that Michelle's questions got Andrea to use the habits of mind. So the things that you said, then it was Andrea's response demonstrated the habits of mind, but because of the way you asked the question. but we love the wonder and awe and, things that were surprises, things we didn't expect to see.
So we're coming to the edge of the end. And thank you so much, both Andrea and Michelle, for such a rich stimulation of conversation. And Art, thank you for getting us set into thinking about this in a new avenue. And I think we're now on that path. So what I'd do is I'd like to say that we invite any of you who would like to continue this conversation with us. You can just let us know. You can let either Michelle, Allison, me, Art know. I'd like to join the group that's having this conversation. And as I said before, it's Juanita. So far, it's Juanita and Pat and Michelle, Allison, and Art. And Liz, okay. And to really begin to think this through. So yes, if you're interested in continuing this, we can move it off of Monday, where we're kind of trying to keep our Monday meetings so that we don't get too much into a training mode, and we keep our topics kind of open. But just text us, write to us, do whatever to tell us you'd like to be a part of this continuing conversation. We invite you to do that. And then we wanted to say, and Michelle, you want to talk about where we're going next for our next meeting?
Sure. One, I'll send just a follow-up to tonight's conversation. So if you're interested in continuing to be a part of this development in thinking, that might be an easy way. You can just reply to me and we'll make sure that we circle back and connect with you. Again, thank you, Andrea, for just being so generous and sharing your thinking. Next, our next Monday meeting, which is, if I looked at my calendar right, it's March 6th. Yep. So March 6th. So a month from now, our topic focus that we wanted to lift up is the certified schools and that community that you heard a little bit tonight. Andrea is part of that certified school community. So the international learning communities of excellence, and an opportunity to celebrate them, but also learn from their journey and share a little bit of the thinking from the Institute about some reshaping of that certification process. So we'll inform you, and then also our plan is to invite some schools to come forward and engage in the dialogue. So we look forward to seeing all of you next month. And feel free to reach out at any point with questions, wonderings, future topics that you might have, some curiosities around. And just what a pleasure and a gift it is to all be together. So thank you so much, Bena, Art, Allison. Thank you for your just really outstanding leadership of the Institute, and for all of you, your commitment to the habits of mind and to just continuing to make the world a more thoughtful place.
Mhm.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care.
There are a couple of things you said that I think are really kind of stand out for me. One is that we have to be very aware. It is wonderful that you were able to name the habits, but that's not the point. The point is that you were living them, that you were being who you are. And one of the things that you said that I thought was probably the entry point that we all need to be considering, which is not so much how can I script what I'm going to do, as how can I honor the other person in such a way that I'm giving them the invitation to join me. And I think there's such a difference between having the invitation to join me in this conversation versus my asking you a question that will or will not put you to a place where I'm here to help you. And those are the nuances of what you were doing tonight, and the nuances of what was happening between you and Andrea in my mind. And because you were, on show, I'm sure you were being extra conscious of all these things. But the truth is that it was just a seamless recognition of the fact that these habits are in play. And that it's never, just like in the discussion group I was in, they said, but this just shows it's never one habit in play.
Exactly.
Never.
That's so true. I
So
agree with that.
Yeah, so it's really realizing, and I think that is the growing place for people who want to be in the consultant, an IHOM consultant.
Mhm.
But I think the bridge between individual practitioner, where they've had that highly personalized experience of what it means for students and for themselves, I do think the bridge is in this place that we're in right now.
I agree with that.
The other thing that I was processing is the notion of warmth. That was something that Andrea said directly when she was processing the question, what did it feel like to be part of that conversation? But I think the other dynamic is that you're drawing out from the individual as opposed to sort of imposing in. So instead of it feeling like an agenda, something that's being pushed, it's something that actually, it's not necessarily being pulled, but potentially being opened up. And I think one of the interesting parts of that is that warmth, that sort of emotive feel that it's not just a safe place, but it's a friendly place. And I think that relational part of the coaching process is just so important to establish.
I think what we've just been through and what has been recorded, I'm so glad, is that we have had a reflective conversation and you have shared your metacognition, what was going on in your head. And I think that's so very powerful that we could demonstrate that as a reflection. And what I may have interpreted incorrectly, but I think I did, was that at some point in your conversation, there was a shift. And the shift was away from the habits of mind as a list that you were kind of checking them off inside your head. And what you shifted to was listening to her and picking up from her cues, which were the habits of mind that she was thinking about and how to respond to them. And that to me was so powerful that you gave up the list and began tuning into her. Marvelous.
I think you are exactly correct in that statement. And that was that tension in the moment of thinking, okay, there's a purpose here of serving Andrea, and there's a purpose of serving the group, and realizing and giving myself internally permission. It's knowing in my heart, it's not about the list and ticking it off, and letting go of that, even when I knew that's not what it needed to be. And you were exactly right. It then allows you to listen more deeply to Andrea. And yeah, it was an interesting conversation, and I'm excited to circle back with her.
And I think that tells us something about the training, that as long as you're dependent upon a list, you're not quite ready yet. Is when you can give that up and pick up in the moment the habit of mind that the person is seeking or asking for, or that you're using. That's a shift in training strategy, I think, in how they're going to be introduced to and using the habits of mind in an interactive way, as you just did. It has to be from listening and not from the memorizing a list.
That's what I meant by fluency. I think you just have to have that level of fluency.
Okay.
And I think you have to, there's so much trust in this, because, you do have to be attuning. And to attune with somebody else, you have to trust to the fact that what you're doing is moving in the right direction. That you're not worrying over, am I doing this? Or am I doing the brain has to stop chattering, and you have to just say, I'm here for you. And I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. And God knows where we're going, but what's the difference?
Yes, trusting in the person, trusting in the process and the journey, which Scott in the debriefing, and it was right when the breakouts were ending. And so didn't get a chance to explore this, but he said something about the idea, how important it is to raise the question, are we being effective or correct? Correct's not the right word. I forget the other word, but my sense is what we were just talking about is a little bit of what he was trying to get to. Is the conversation, and in what way is the conversation serving the person, and whatever the agreement or intention is of that exchange. I mean, certainly for all of us, we're going to have conversations with certified schools where there is something very specific that they are committing to, in a journey that they're taking, and we have a responsibility to communicate that to and with them, but to also learn and help them, as you said, Allison, figure out, how do they connect? What's their motivation? What do they want to sort of gain from the process? What are they curious about? I think it's it's a beautiful opportunity to create sort of a new dance or rhythm, and it's fun.
Beautiful opportunity. And I think we should think about it.